So I am joined by Edmund, who's the president of FlowCap Advisory. So you're going to talk about what being an elite soldier taught you about sales. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, because I find it very intriguing.
Yeah, so just a quick background on myself. I spent 10 years in the Canadian military. I was airborne infantry, so guys that fell out of the planes. I
Wow.
also taught
Thank
boot
you for your
camp,
service.
so I was a boot camp instructor as well. Yeah, and for in the next half hour or so, I'll share some techniques, some of the techniques that I applied in my sales career, both as a salesperson as well as a sales manager. A lot of those techniques that I learned from the military. Obviously, I can't share everything I learned in the 10 years because we don't have the time, but I can tell you some very high level stuff.
Awesome. Well, don't mess with you, number one. And I'm really looking forward to this. It's a very interesting perspective on sales. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here. So you have your own business now. So you're, according to your bio, performance coach for high-level sales and business professionals. So FlowCap Advisory, that's the organization. Is that correct? Amazing.
Yes.
So, I'm going to put just maybe your company information in the chat so people can find your website easily, and they can click on it just from the session chat here. So I'll do that, and I will leave you to your presentation, but just wanted to say thanks so much for being here. And I'm really looking forward to the presentation. So thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. It's my pleasure.
All right, I'll leave you to it. Thanks.
Thanks. And also to continue on a little bit on that as well, post-military, I spent 15 years in Canadian finance, so right on the heart of Bay Street, managing money for high net worth clients. So I applied a lot of these principles as well that I learned from the military in order to train other advisors, mentor other advisors, and my team members as well. So you should be seeing a slide that I currently have up there. Nothing's proprietary, so by all means, feel free to screenshot or take a picture of it. And I don't have too many slides. I just have three main concepts that I'm going to go through within the next 45 minutes or half an hour or so. So the first thing I'd like to sort of explain to you is the 4 stages of learning that whenever you want to encounter something new, everybody will go through these 4 stages. All right. So I'll read them out, which is unconscious incompetent, conscious incompetent, conscious competent, and conscious competent and unconscious competent. So in step 1, unconscious incompetent, I know that kind of sounds negative, but really what it means is that you're not aware of what you don't know. Right. So I'll give you an example. The first day that I showed up at airborne school, so they're literally going to teach you how to fall out of an airplane and survive when it's in mid-flight. So you have no idea how somebody can do that. So you are unconscious of your incompetence. You have no idea how that is done. So the first thing that they do is they bring you to a classroom and they show you all these diagrams and they explain how all this works, what you're supposed to do. And once you get that information in that classroom teaching, you now become conscious of your incompetence. So just because you know doesn't mean that you can do it. They can't just say, okay, now everybody get on the plane and then, when the door opens, everybody falls out. It's like, you have no idea, like, forget it. You're going to hurt yourself. So you're still conscious, but you're still incompetent. You cannot do it, but you're aware of it. You're aware of what you don't know. So the next phase they go into in jump school is they'll go into conscious competent. In fact, this is where we'll spend the most amount of our time in jump school. It's 3 weeks. So what they do is they repeat the exercise of how to do it over and over and over again. It's massive repetition every single day going through these drills. So I'll give you a quick description of what entails this activity. So in order to jump out of an airplane and survive, in the military, there's 3 phases. And in the first phase, they teach you, which is the airplane or exit drills. So how to exit the airplane without hurting yourself and making sure that the parachute deploys properly. So it's exit drills. That's the first phase. The second phase is descent. All right. So how to go through flight. So how to go descend on a parachute and how to steer it and navigate it to a part of the earth, which is going to be hospitable for you landing and probably not injuring yourself or, potentially death. Right. So how to find a spot on the earth, which is probably going to be hospitable for you. Right. So that's descent drills. And then final phase is landing drills. So how do you land and roll in such a way where you're not going to break something? So that is an example of when I explain those three phases here, and I'm going to go into detail, but just explaining those three details starts to show everyone here that you are now a little conscious of your incompetence, right? So you're aware of what needs to happen, but you're incompetent. You can't do it. Doesn't mean that you can do it. In order to be able to do it, you have to go out and start to apply it, or we have to go through, well, what I'll explain on the next slide is you have to go out and practice it. And then as you continually practice this over and over again, so between these two, so between conscious competent and unconscious competent, the more you repeat this exercise, the more you do it over and over and over again. What they do is in the 3 weeks, you've never been on an airplane yet, but they keep doing these drills over and over till you can do it in your sleep. And we call it muscle memory. And it's repetition that causes this. By the time you get to get onto the airplane, and it's the first time you're ever going to jump out of a plane, we have achieved a level of unconscious competent, meaning you're so freaked out and so stressed, but your body takes over. The door opens up, and you repeated this so much that things just happen. You enter into what we call a state of flow, and things just happen, and instinct takes over. So how do you get to that phase for yourself in your own training, and how do you do that within other people? Or how can we as sales managers get our teams to get to this phase? Everything that is taught in the military, for the most part, goes through this exercise. All right. So in the military, when we teach a new exercise, and this is the exact same thing I use to apply in my own self-learning as well as teaching other people. And it's called EDI. So explain, demonstrate, and imitate. So the first phase is you sit somebody down. You say, "This is I'm going to explain to you. Sorry, I'm going to explain to you the phases of learning. Or I'm going to explain to you what you're going to need to do in the sales meeting." So similar enough, for those of you who's gone through sales training or teach sales, there's also three phases in a sales meeting. There's the rapport building opening, then there's the pitch, and then there's the close. Right? So I'm explaining that to you. So you and I as sales managers, or if you're a salesperson, when you learn those things, somebody has to explain it to you, the mechanics of a sales meeting. Just because you learn the mechanics of the sales meeting doesn't mean that you can go and do it. So the next thing we do is we take the junior salesperson and now watch me do it live in front of this meeting. Don't say anything, just sit there and I will demonstrate how to do this. And I'll go and we'll run the sales meeting. So you watch me a couple of times. Watch me enough where you are shadowing me. And then the next time, once you feel confident enough, I've demonstrated enough times, I want you to now attempt this, which is imitate. Now I want you to take the lead and I will shadow you, right? I can't tell you how many times in financial services where I've come across sales managers that didn't understand this concept. It kind of shocked me because I learned this concept when I was young. I learned it through leadership school, the Canadian Forces the leadership school in Petawawa, where they explain this concept, right? You have to EDI everything, right? And it's a nice transition where we can start to learn to get to conscious competent to unconscious competent, where if we watch somebody demonstrate it enough times, and then we can start to imitate it, and then back and forth, right? So how I would do this with my team members, once again, I would explain, then I would demonstrate a couple of times, then I would let them imitate it. And when they imitate it, I put them into the driver's seat. Of course, stress, their cortisol levels and their stress levels and maybe even adrenaline would just spike. So they may or not be able to get it. So once they try to imitate me, then I go back to demonstrate. It's like, so the next one, I will do it again so you can watch to see how you perform. And then we just alternate back and forth between demonstration and imitate. If required, if I see that they miss things and I'll realize that maybe they didn't catch it or maybe I didn't explain it right, I might go back to explain. So EDI. So most techniques or most training in the military is done through EDI. The next phase I want to get into sort of encompasses all these sort of components together. So one of the other things that we have in the military is something called the OODA loop. So an OODA loop was designed by U.S. Air Force Colonel John Boyd. All right. So it stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. So here's an example of, as a sales manager and as a salesperson, anybody in business will be going through sort of this kind of loop. It's a mental loop. It's an observation loop. What it basically means is that as a salesperson, when you're into something, you want to observe the situation. So you want to take a look and lay the land. So Colonel John Boyd is a U.S. Air Force. I think he was in the 1940s when he was an Air Force pilot. So he's talking about dogfighting. So this OODA loop was developed by him on this process of this continuous loop of how to overcome an enemy combatant, an enemy fighter pilot. It has been since adopted into wider part of the military. In fact, the U.S. Marine Combat Hunter Program, which talks a lot about situational awareness, also incorporates this concept, or also has this as a main component of teaching. As well as I'm also a situational awareness instructor as well. And in situational awareness, we talk about OODA loop, right? So as human beings, we go into this, we naturally observe. And this is something I want to help all sales managers and salespeople become a little bit more intentional with this exercise. So I'll give you an example of how we naturally do this. So when we get into an OODA loop, basically what goes on is we're always scanning. We're always scanning the horizon for threats. So normally when you're walking down the street, whether you believe or whether you realize it or not, you're scanning for threats. And your subconscious is always just looking around at different things. That's the observe component. Now in sales, what we want to do is that we want to observe many different things. So an OODA loop can be something that's very tight. And outside of the military, this concept has also traveled over and applied in athletics. So pro athletics, anything from NFL, NBA, tennis is used in tennis, and it's even transferred over into Fortune 500. So OODA loops are even taught to executives, especially lawyers, especially if they're litigators. So if you can imagine understanding it's a form of combat when you're in court, and to understand the evolving situation. So if the situation is evolving very fast, and it can be also stressful, just like a sales meeting, it's being able to observe and analyzing the information that is coming in and being able to react in a continuous loop. So observation means if we advance right into a sales meeting, observation, the first thing you want to do is when you come in, and this is something like when we talk about EDI, this is something I would explain to a junior salesperson. I explain to them is that what I'm doing, as soon as I enter in the sales meeting, my observation is on heightened alert. So it starts when I park the car at a sales meeting, and I walk in and I pay attention to what's happening outside. Are people smoking outside? Is it staff? Are they complaining? Are they happy? Are they laughing? Observe, observe, observe. Then you walk in, you talk to the receptionist, you interact with the receptionist. Is the receptionist happy? Are they angry? Are they frazzled? Are they bored? All these things will be these little clues or little cues to help you in your sales meeting. Observe, observe, observe. Orient talks about what you do with all the information. As you're absorbing all this information, you're starting to compose a profile to decide how you're going to react, right? So it's adjusting your emotional state with the emotional energy of the room. And once again, this is done in many different combat environments. So Marines have been trained to do this as well as they enter into new territories. Observe the situation, observe what's going on around you, and then take that information and orient yourself to decide how you want to set yourself up. And then that is a decision I want to make. So what kind of emotional line or what kind of sales line am I going to lead off with? Because if the receptionist is crying or she's very upset, you don't want to come in and say, hey, how's it going? What a bright and lovely day it is, right? That's kind of can potentially be emotionally insensitive. So that might be the wrong decision, right? So based on the information you have, you make a decision and then you act, which is say something. And when you say something, you immediately look for a response. So you go back in the loop. So you come all the way back to observation. So we say something. Now, how did that person respond? And did I make the right decision or did I make the wrong decision? And you continually loop that around and around. So for instance, dogfighting. In dogfighting, what John Boyd was talking about was if they're flying around and they're flying over the English Channel, there's no threats yet. So you're scanning the horizon looking for a threat. And as soon as you see an enemy plane, now you have to make a decision. So I observe, 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 then I orient, and now I discover that there's an enemy plane. So I have to decide what I'm going to do. And when he takes a look at it, he realizes that it's a Messerschmitt and it's a 109 and it has a faster engine and faster climb rate. So he decides in order to engage with this enemy, I've got to fly higher. So he decides that he's going to fly higher up into the sun so that when they encounter each other, he's going to have the advantage. So that's a form of act. And then he goes back into this OODA loop, which is observe again. Did he notice that did he react to how I flew, or is he completely oblivious? Same thing in sales. Right? So continuously go through this OODA loop. So OODA loop is also, as you can imagine, and I explain this to my subordinate, this is what I'm always doing. I'm always circling and circling and circling. Every time I say a statement, I'm trying to orient and decide and try to observe the response. And based on the response, I try to make another decision. I'll give you an example how OODA loop is very important. So as I was talking about, there's three main phases to every sales meeting, which is rapport building, pitch, and then close. How OODA loop is important is based on if I come into somebody's office, I'm making an observation of everything around the office. And based on the office, I'm what's there, I start to create a profile, right? So is the office really organized? Is it minimalist? Is it cluttered? All these, is there pictures of family in the background? Is there golf clubs and a whole bunch of golf trophies? All these things will give you clues, right? So that is part of observation. Then you got to orient. So based on that, all those types of stimuli that I see, got to make a decision on what I want to say, and then I make an act, and then continually follow that loop. And what you're looking for is enough rapport building to look for cues to advance to pitch. So as soon as I have established rapport, I get that person laughing, I get some kind of emotional connection. Now we don't want to continue that too long. Let's advance to pitch. Then I go to pitch. When I'm in the pitch phase, what I'm saying, and going back to the presentation component, going back to conscious competent and unconscious competent, what you want to do is you want to train your staff to be able to do the pitch as all the way up to unconscious competent, meaning they're on autopilot. They're saying the pitch so many times, or they practice it so many times that they can just do it in their sleep. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want to maximize the fullest amount of their energy towards observing while they're saying the lines or saying your pitch, because what they want to do is they want to pick up closing signals, because what they want to do is what's the body language of the person, the client or the customer? Are their arms crossed? Are they opening up? Are they sitting in front of their chair? Are they leaning back? All these types of things will give you cues. And if they start asking questions, of course, we all know when they start asking questions like, how much would this cost? Or if I signed the paperwork today, how quickly can you deliver? All of those are examples of closing questions. So you've got to watch for those types of closing signs. Then you go into your trial close, right? So now you go into the closing component of your meeting, which many of you should know this, which is you advance to your trial close, right? And you've got some questions where, okay, it's a soft close, and then you observe, orient, decide, and act. And based on how they respond, then you can go on to your full close, right? And continually advance and go further and further and further, right? So one of the things that I've seen in the sales industry is that we often do things called role play. And it's often, whenever I mention the word role play, you'll have a lot of salespeople that they'll roll their eyes and they'll groan a little bit, and they think it sounds a little hokey, right? Because it's not real, it's all this type of stuff. And I really changed my attitude towards sales role play. And I think it's incredibly important. And what really changed my mind is that when I was working in financial services, I discovered that a lot of my clients were I was having a lot of success with people that were Bay Street lawyers, so very high-end lawyers, a lot of them even litigators. And I discovered that a lot of them go through trial prep. So it's trial prep and witness prep. And that is all essentially role play. And they'll go through all the potential questions that they can be asked, and they'll practice the answer. And that's at a very high level in the world, or in commerce. And it's the exact same thing when it comes to very high level performing professionals, including sales. And we'll do this as athletes as well. Pro athletes practice more than they actually play. And it's repetition and over and over and over. Military is the exact same thing. So when I taught boot camp, I would tell you that when it comes to the 4 stages of learning, most of the time in boot camp, you're spending in this conscious competent to unconscious competent. And it happens through repetition over and over and over, and you never stop. So one of my lines that I used to have in the military, I used to tell people, I just repeat the drills over and over again. And for me, I wanted to make sure that the people I was training, my team, would be better than everybody else. So I'm trying to get them to unconscious competent faster and longer, and keep them there, to the point where the people that I would be training would, someone would raise their hand, is like, this is incredibly, this is like so repetitive, right? And they would ask me, it's like, how much longer are we going to do this? So my response to them was, we're going to do this until you cannot stand it anymore. And we will then choose that as the halfway point. And then we're going to do it again. And we're going to keep doing it for that'll be the middle point. And they would just blow their mind. But what you understand is when we start to get to unconscious, or in order to get into unconscious competent and being able to really understand our craft, it takes this massive repetition. And that's one of the challenges that I see in salespeople today. So if you're a sales manager and you're managing a team of younger people, like essentially millennials, this is one of the challenges that I see with them. In that, a lot of times with the current cohort, you'll see them in unconscious competent. You'll try to explain to them what they need to know. So they'll come back and they might say, you know what, I don't need to know this, or when I need to know this, I'm just going to YouTube it and I'll just watch it. So once you watch a YouTube video on anything, you're going to get to conscious incompetent. But I've seen in a lot of young executives today, they mistake in this state here, conscious incompetent for unconscious competent. They mean that I can watch it once and I think I can do it. It kind of reminds me of this section in The Matrix. So in The Matrix, and it's kind of like the world has unfolded this way. In The Matrix, they have this video where Trinity is saying that, it's like, oh, I got to learn how to fly a helicopter. And then she just downloads how to fly a helicopter. And she's like, I know how to fly a helicopter now. She gets in, she flies it, right? It's kind of like how modern society approaches learning today. They think that, I don't know anything about how to fly a helicopter, but I'm just going to watch a YouTube video once. And I'm really conscious incompetent, thinking that I'm unconscious competent and I can do it right away. That is not honing your craft. Unfortunately, in order to hone your craft, you have to get into unconscious competent. So today, for me as a coach, one of my biggest challenges or hurdles with my clients is being able to usher them gently to explain to them, no, we need to continue on with this repetitions over and over and over again to get you into a state of unconscious competent. Why is that a necessity in today's life? And the reason why is, as much as you might have the attitude or desire to be unconscious competent, your brain has to catch up, right? So it comes down to how the physiology in your brain, how it works. When you learn something new, you do not have the neural pathways in your brain strong enough to be able to do it where it becomes automatic, which is unconscious competent. It's creating, when those neural pathways fire together, they start to get a little stronger. And it takes repetition, continuous repetition over and over and over again until those neural pathways become strong enough where they become automatic. So the best way to explain that is sales is very similar in this regard. That if you're teaching somebody how to drive a car, the first step you're going to do is explain all the tools, like this is the steering wheel, this is the gas pedal, all these types of things, and explain all those stories. So EDI, right? So explain, and then people are going to see you drive and you're going to demonstrate it. Now, when they get into it, it's to create those neural pathways where when most of us, when we took our driver's test, we're panicking, we're sweating, we're nervous, all these types. That is a example of conscious competent. So for the people that have a driver's license right now, if you think back to when you got your driver's license, you did it in a state of probably conscious competent. You really had to focus. And as a salesperson, it's the same thing. The first time you go out in sales, you have to recognize this in yourself as well as in others. When you're training other people, they're probably going through it in conscious competent. The way that you can advance them to unconscious competent is repetition. So now that we've driven for a number of years, some of us can eat a bagel, drink a coffee, and talk on the phone while we're driving. I'm not saying that you should. I mean, it's illegal if you're going to talk on the phone, but many people can do multiple things while they're driving now. It's because the habit of driving, the neural pathways on those habits have become stronger, and you have become unconscious competent. So the the thing that really comes down to is that despite our intent or desire to learn how to do something fast, it requires repetition in our brain to be able to wire these things. Everything in the military is taught at this level. So when I start to train my staff and I start to go into EDI, or explain, demonstrate, imitate, what I do is I start to increase the complexity level. So you're teaching something very gentle. When you explain, you do it in a very low stress environment. Then you demonstrate and you get them to imitate. Once they have been able to handle that, then you raise the complexity level. The same thing applies for you as a sales manager. You might be very nervous. You might be a little bit out of your comfort zone to be able to train people. And what you want to do is also for yourself, find somebody to explain to you different techniques of sales management. Then look for demonstrations of how people do it and then start to imitate, go back and forth, back and forth. It's pretty much all those 4 stages of learning plus explain, demonstrate, imitate is a way that I self-taught myself. After I left the military, when I went to source information of how I needed to learn to become a stockbroker, or how I wanted to learn to close high net worth clients, it's all the same material. I asked for a mentor. I asked the mentor to bring me to sales meetings. I watched my mentor run sales meetings. Then I asked my mentor to shadow me on different sales meetings and give me critiques and then go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So all those components are incredibly important. So finishing off, once we've gone through those stages of learning, the default that you want to have as a good, strong salesperson and sales manager is always continuously going through this OODA loop, which can be in a very tight loop, but it can also be on a very wide loop when it comes to an overall business. So if I'm growing my practice and it starts with prospecting. So when I prospect, I don't know who my ideal client is yet. I just maybe started out. So you're at an observe phase and I try different things. So it's explore, explore, explore. And then after that, once I start to get some responses and some feedback, then I can start to adjust my OODA loop and focus a little bit more on that one specific area. And then I start to do the OODA loop focused in on that particular client base. So all these different sort of concepts that we bring together, these 3 sort of work together for, I guess, as a nice little package, as a very high level of what to do, or some of the things that I've learned being an elite military person, to how it helped me in the sales world. And of course, there's a lot more that you could dive into. There's a lot more things that and challenges in sales that you can come across. I'm sure there's tons of things. There's probably a lot of experience with the people that are in the room as well. So feel free, if you want to reach out, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm also pretty active on Instagram, and I just recently started to become one of the talking heads on Clubhouse. So you can follow me there as well, and I jump into different rooms to talk about many different subjects. But feel free to connect with me if you've got some questions. We have a couple of minutes now if you want to ask some questions, or you can connect with me, and I'd be happy to have a chat one-on-one to talk about some of these concepts or how I might be able to help you as either a sales manager or as a salesperson. So if you have, that's pretty much all I got. If people have some questions, you're certainly willing to ask. Let me see if we see any. We don't have any there. But once again, you're certainly welcome to connect with me, and I'll be happy to chat. So Rachel, I don't know what we want to do next.
I'm back. that was fantastic. Right. That was a lot of information in 30 minutes, but that was amazing. So I guess I have a question, if that's okay. So you talked about trial versus final close. So, you might have your prospective client kind of asking these, kind of pre-closed questions. So how do you transition from that trial close to your final close effectively?
Okay. So first you want to do is you want to look for closing cues, right? So of course, some of the closing questions would be like, as you're pitching, somebody asks you a question like, Edmund, if I were to sign this paperwork today, how quickly can you deliver this? Right? That's a closing question. Right. As soon as somebody asks me that, the meeting for me transfers over into the closing phase, and I go to the closing phase. And then there's a number of different things that have to happen in the closing phase. One is I answer the question. It's like, if you sign this paperwork today, we can deliver in 1 week, and I can assure you it'll happen in 1 week. Then I go into a soft close, right? The soft close is we've also got to determine price, for an example. So if we go under a value-based pricing model, then we start to advance into things like, I would start doing a soft close. We're setting it up, saying that how much is not having my product costing your company? It's like, well, because we don't have your product, we are losing $100,000 a month. It's like, great. So I know that, okay, if I charged you $90,000 a month or $50,000 a month, would that sound like a good idea to you? That's a soft close. It's like, absolutely. If I pay $50,000 to get $100,000 back, yes, I can understand that that would be a good proposition. That's a soft close. Then I know if he says yes to that, or the person says yes to that, then I can advance to a harder close. It's like, well, I got the paperwork right here. Let's do it. What's stopping us from doing that?
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. So we have a comment that was awesome, Edmund. So I think probably everybody's just kind of taking it all in. So I put your website address here, so flowcapadvisory.com. I think I linked it right to your team page. But if you want to maybe I can put your information. It's at Edmund.
The best thing to do. Sorry, Rachel. The best thing to do, that's actually an old website that comes up under Google. So I don't use that website, but people are certainly okay to take a look at it. That used to be my old team.
Okay.
But if you want to connect with me, use one of my links. Like, connect with me on LinkedIn or DM me through Instagram. I'm responsive there. So feel free to connect with me on that site.
And you've got your slide up there. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending the time. And you are such a seasoned professional in so many different aspects of the financial world, of your Army background, of your sales management background. So like, what a better guy to speak to us today about this stuff. So thanks so much, Edmund, for your time. And I hope to connect with you in the future as well. So.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I'll be happy to chat.
All right. Thanks so much. So our next session starts in, I think, about 5 minutes or so. So our next session is in the session area. And then in the interim, in the next like 5-10 minutes, you could use our networking area to make some connections. So again, thanks, Edmund. And I look forward to seeing everyone at our next session. So thanks.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks.